Hello, listeners. This is Sara Boueri, and you are listening to the CHRO Mindset Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the CHRO Mindset Podcast, where we bring you candid, thought-provoking conversations with top HR leaders and experts. And here's your host, Pulkit Joshi. Today, we have the privilege of hosting Sara Boueri, an accomplished HR leader with over 15 years of experience in the logistics, construction, manufacturing, oil and gas, tourism, and hospitality sectors across local, multinational, and government organizations. She is recognized for pioneering innovative HR practices, championing employee well-being, and earning global HR leadership accolades, including being the top 50 HR leaders in the Middle East. Sara's mission is to align practices with workforce needs, fostering equity, and her initiatives have garnered widespread acclaim and recognition. Sara, thanks for taking our time to speak with us today, and welcome to the CHRO Mindset Podcast.
Thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Great. Thank you so much. So before we dive into our discussion, let's explore a lighter side of HR with an icebreaker question. With your extensive experience and innovative approach to HR, we are eager to hear your perspectives on a hypothetical scenario. And this one goes like this. If HR had its own Olympic event, what would it be and how would you prepare for it?
I love that question. Like, of all the things I thought I was going to be asked, this would have been the least likely to have been asked. So if HR were to have an Olympic sport, it's actually a sport I'm going to make up. It's something that I used to tell my friends and colleagues about, but why don't we ever have Olympics about like everyday things? And then I always used examples, like, for example, you go grocery shopping and you have like 20 grocery bags. We always try and carry as many bags as humanly possible and then like suffer while we get to the door. And so I started to say, like, what if we had Olympic events where these everyday tasks were turned into competitions? So one of them is, how many grocery bags you can physically carry after you've gone shopping. The other one I thought of is, when you're walking and someone is walking and they're holding the door open for you, you then suddenly like run and you try and, not bother them too much. So you walk faster or you run faster. So I call that the door opening sprint. And so like all of these like little silly everyday competitions or things that we do. And so when you gave me that question, I'm like, that would be a perfect Olympic event for HR people, because we're just doing everyday things. We're just trying to get by, or we're doing nothing extraordinary, but we're trying to do it as efficiently as possible. And sometimes we fail, and sometimes it's quite humorous. But for the most part, we're just trying our best. So that's probably what I would choose.
That's a great answer. I loved it. So now that we have explored the speculative HR Olympic event, let's shift our focus to real world leadership experiences, Sara. And talking of navigating challenges, walk us through a personal story when you had to step into a leadership role during a period of crisis or uncertainty, and how that impacted your growth and leadership style.
It's funny, I was literally just talking about this morning, and I was discussing how during the pandemic, I was working in the tourism and the hospitality world, and that was a huge crisis. I don't think we're ever going to have a similar crisis from an HR perspective where we're impacted so significantly. And I remember telling the person that I was speaking to that it was such an important time for us because, first of all, we were all dealt with this massive issue. And as HR professionals, we were constantly pivoting and trying new things and trying to adapt to this new way of working. And on top of that, being in hospitality and being in tourism, which was one of or if not the most heavily impacted industry in the world, it brought in so many learnings. For example, the importance of really transparent communication. That was probably one of the main times that I realized how important transparent communication is with all stakeholders. And even though you need to have difficult conversations, and even though it's not an easy situation, just the fact that this transparency was available and you were talking to all of the people and stakeholders around you like adults with maturity, and you were explaining the situation to them, no matter the consequence of our decisions or the impact that we had to, or it's their impact on what we had to do, people just were so aligned when there was this transparent and open communication, and there was no trying to sugarcoat or hide from the actual issue at hand.
Yeah. No, those were very difficult times indeed.
Yeah.
And I think now that it's behind our backs, but that certainly has helped a lot of leaders come to terms with difficult situations, and in some way or the other has left an indelible mark on how they have grown through those challenges.
Yeah.
Okay, let's keep going. Now that we've explored how this crisis impacted one's personal growth and leadership style, let's now pivot to broader HR challenges. So talk to us about any HR related challenge or obstacle you have faced that taught you valuable lessons and contributed to your growth.
Again, on the topic of communication, there was another, when I first started in the HR leadership journey, I was working in a construction company in Abu Dhabi. And at that point, so we had a bunch of accommodations, and we used to provide food for all of our employees. And I remember once I went to the accommodations, and I was speaking to the employees who were there. And I was asking them, what can we do to make your life better? And I would say the majority, 80 to 90%, all complained about the food and the quality of the food that they were getting. And they were complaining about the quantity, the quality, the taste, so a whole bunch of things. So I remember going back and doing this whole analysis, and I found that we were actually paying 20% more, but getting 30% less food, so 30% less meals a day. So for me, it was a no-brainer. I'm like, well, for cheaper, we can get more food with better quality. And so from a black and white, naive young person joining a leadership position, I'm like, this is perfect. I'm going to be a superstar. I'm going to get cost savings and make the employees happy. So I immediately implemented a new catering company to come in and to cater for our employees. And I think, if not the next day, the day after, my entire expo site went on strike. I got a call from a very angry project manager. And at the time, I think I was like 27. And this project manager must have been in his 40s, 50s. Very, very angry guy calls me up. It's very high stress in the expo site. And he's like, you shut my site down. And I remember not knowing what happened. Anyway, fast forward a few days later, I found out that the catering company that we used to use was very closely linked to an employee who had been in the company for like 20 years. And because of that, he had many connections with the foreman, with a lot of people on the ground in the construction side of things. And so because of his influence, he managed to influence these key stakeholders to stop this project in order for him not to lose the business. And that taught me such a valuable lesson. And it taught me that just because the answer is very simple and laid out in front of you doesn't mean you have alignment. Just because it logically makes sense does not mean you have alignment. And so I quickly learned that afterwards, whenever there's a major decision that we need to take as HR, even when it comes to food or accommodation, the most important thing is to really ensure you've done your groundwork, you've done your homework, and that you know the consequence of potentially implementing this decision.
Wow.
Yeah.
Story, I would say, but I'm sure that would have taught many lessons to everybody who was involved there. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So now let's transition from personal growth and lessons learned during HR challenges. It has given us a glimpse of a little bit of window into how your HR journey has been. Let's now zoom in on a very critical aspect of HR strategy and talking about employee benefits and total rewards. And this question is very much specific to this particular theme. So talk to us, how do you balance cost considerations with the desire to provide a comprehensive and attractive employee benefits and total rewards package?
Great question. Thanks. So one of my favorite topics to tackle whenever I'm in an HR space or whenever I'm newly in an HR leadership role is that employee benefits scheme. We often think that employee benefits in the salary grid is purely just salary and monetary benefits such as air ticket allowance or schooling and, the traditional benefits that we have. But we often forget that there's a whole underlying side of benefits that don't actually need to necessarily cost the company money. In fact, in many cases, it can actually save the company quite a lot of money. And it's this untapped benefits situation that I personally love to tackle. And I'll give you an example. Let's say your company has a zero budget when it comes to new increasing salaries or increments or adding any new monetary benefits. There's so many creative ways that you can add benefits to your employees that don't cost money. For example, if you're in a company that's had employees, or if you're a company that's older than a certain amount of years in business, and you have employees who have a long tenure with you, it would be an amazing initiative that costs nothing to put together like a loyalty program. So for example, I've been in the company 10 years. I'm a gold tier versus someone who's joined the company, more recently, and they would be like a bronze or a silver tier over there. And similar to how like Emirates Airlines has different tiers, or airlines in general have different tiers based on how often you fly them, you can have similar tiers for your employees in the organization. And then depending on what tier they're in, you open up non-monetary benefits. For example, if someone is a platinum member, they get invited once a month to a breakfast with the CEO, no matter what their position is. So this is something that you unlock when you reach this certain level. The other thing that could technically have a monetary impact, but not really, like a bit of an indirect one, would be to increase leave days. So if I've been in the company for 20 years, I might have more leave days than someone who's been in the company less days. So it's about really innovatively tackling the benefits that you can play around with that will not really have a huge cost impact on the business. And this is one of my favorite things when I look at, trying to control costs, yet give employees more, or at least make employees feel more special.
Great. Thank you for that, Sara. Let's now shift gears a bit and let's now dive into the practicalities of organizational adaptability. Building on our discussion about balancing considerations, can you take us through a real world scenario? Specifically, if you could share a story of a time when your organization had to make changes to its employee benefits and total rewards program to better meet the needs of employees.
Cool, thank you. I'm gonna raise it back to RAC Tourism, one of my favorite companies that I worked with. Okay. So this was back in end of 2020. So this was after a year of salary cuts, of redundancies, of just, like a not so great year in terms of employee well-being and HR in general. And I was looking at the workforce, and I was looking at our current workforce, and I realized that a lot of the benefits that we offer were not relevant to the employees that we had. So we had the typical family status, which in the UAE means that visa costs plus insurance for dependents are covered. Now, considering the demographic of the UAE and in specific the demographic of Ras Al Khaimah tourism, the majority of our employees didn't actually have dependents that they could use this stuff on. Or if they did have dependents, they didn't have 3 dependents. They might have 1, they could have 2. So we realized that this benefit was not really relevant to them. So we decided to shake it up a bit, and we decided to say for 2 reasons. Number 1 is to attract talent to us, and number 2 is to really have equity, because we really wanted, irrespective of your marital status or your parental status, we wanted everyone to have equal benefits. So this is where we shifted from the traditional family status, which is just your standard visa fees and insurance costs for employees, and we moved on to lifestyle credits. And what this is it's a credit amount that you're given based on your position or based on your tier. And you could use this credit amount if you had, the traditional 2 kids and a spouse. You could use it for the visa fees and insurance. It would cover that. But if you didn't have the traditional, 2 kids and a spouse, you could use it for other things to enhance your lifestyle, such as meal plans or hotel stays or air tickets. You could use it for insurance. The possibilities were really endless, like coaching, education.
Yeah.
And so we really revamped the traditional way that the lifestyle credit methodology was running. And that was an amazing initiative that we did, because especially being in the UAE, where the majority of people are within let's say the mid-20s to early 30s range, and it's not very relevant for them. We really made it a lot more relevant and a lot more equitable for that demographic of people.
Got it. Thank you for that. Let's now transition from the dynamic landscape of adapting benefits to employee needs, and I'm talking about employee engagement and retention. Let's explore some of the questions that I have here. Let's now focus on employee engagement and retention, which is also very much related to employee benefits and total rewards as a topic. So walk us through what innovative employee engagement strategies have you seen in your career that have made a significant impact?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Pulkit. So in all the years I've been in HR, I've seen myself included and other people around me, other HR professionals, really come up with a lot of different engagement strategies and ways to motivate their employees or motivate their teams. And while a lot of it is great in terms of ticking the box and gaining widespread PR recognition, what I found, as simple as it sounds, is the best way to engage your employees as an HR professional is to actually care about your employees and to actually care about what's bothering them and to care about what's stressing them out at work or what they're going through potentially from a personal level. And so while I can talk to you about the amazing initiatives that I've done in my career, I'd rather focus on the root cause. And the root cause is the reason why my engagement, whatever initiatives that we do and that my team does, the reason why they're so popular is because we operate on 2 principles. We operate with the decency effect, where we treat every employee with decency. We try and understand what issues they're facing. And then the second rule is we operate with logic. So too often as HR people, we do things without really understanding why we're doing things. So we have certain policies that we follow, and we don't question why we're following these processes. It's just the way it's always been done. So the most innovative thing that we've done, or that I've done in my career, is I'm constantly questioning the status quo. And this involves, if an employee comes and talks to me about a policy that doesn't make sense, I don't shut them up and say, okay, you know what, this is the policy, this is how it's done. I either explain it to them, which means I understand why this policy is in place. Or if I cannot explain it to them, I start to question the policy and I start to think, okay, this doesn't make sense. I'm unable to explain it to one of my employees, one of my customers. Maybe we need to tweak this. So for me, the most popular engagement strategy and the thing that works the best in terms of engaging employees is really listening to them, listening to their concerns and addressing their concerns quickly.
Great. What a response. Let's continue to build on this theme of impactful employee engagement strategies, Sarah. Let's now navigate the multifaceted landscape of generational dynamics. And my question is related to that only. So how do you address the generational differences in expectations when it comes to employee engagement?
So Pulkit, I'm going to ask you a question. What generation are you?
I am somewhere on the borderline when it comes to millennials.
Am I exposing your age?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, and from your perspective, what are aspects that that motivate you? Like what do you need at work in order to feel motivated?
I think for me, it has always been about having a purpose as to why am I doing, what am I doing. That's where I draw my energy from. If it turns into an always on rigmarole, then I start to sort of lose my energies a bit. For me, it has always been about, the higher purpose that I'm able to serve. And of course, I'm able to create an impact, that not only fulfills the organizational needs, but it gives me a sense of fulfillment when I go back and think about work. So that's...
And what...
Sorry, go ahead, please.
And what about micromanagement? How do you feel about micromanagement?
I am not a fan of micromanagement. I think, although there are different schools of thoughts, I read a book some time back titled The Dichotomy of Leadership, which says that one should micromanage at times, and many a times they should just empower their teams and allow them to do their bit. However, I do agree at times, right? Maybe 95% of the times, one should not micromanage because it just takes away the energy. It leaves people drained out, and more importantly, it doesn't give them the freedom to be their best, right? Of course, they will make mistakes, and that's how one learns, right? I believe if someone is not making a mistake, then they are not going to grow. And if one is being micromanaged, then of course growth will not happen. But there are cases where one has to micromanage just to make sure that the discipline and everything else that falls around it is well taken care of. But again, that should be like a one-off case. I am all for a big no to micromanagers.
Okay, last question from my end. How do you feel about appreciation and when people appreciate you? Or when your leaders appreciate you, or when your team members appreciate you? How do you feel about that?
How do I feel about being
appreciated? Yeah, like being thanked for an amazing job, or getting recognition when you've done an amazing job.
Yeah, so I would say that while there is this inner purpose, that drives one towards their goal, but I do feel that getting recognized and receiving gratitude in whatever form, it could be words, it could be a letter, it could be an email, it could be anything, does make everything so very special, right? And it keeps us on our toes, and we all like it when people value for the kind of contribution that we are able to make. So I see that going away, in these times, because there's so much to do in so little time, right? The crazy times that we are living in. I think that sense is unfortunately slowly going away, especially in this digital world where, all you need to do is to from my vantage point, the biggest or the most worthwhile appreciations have been when somebody really walks in and shakes a hand or tells you upfront that it could be a one-liner, but when that eye-to-eye contact happens, I believe that's when the actual exchange of gratitude happens. So for me, in these times, it will always be the digital minimalism, right? When it comes to passing on gratitude. So that's how I look at it. But yeah, it's a fantastic feeling. It doesn't have to come from the top. Even person that you are working in or person who is reporting to you, if he or she has great things to say about one's leadership, it always helps us do better job at what we do.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And final question from my end. Do you think that the dislike for being micromanaged, the lack of recognition or the need for recognition, and all of these aspects that I had asked you about before, do you think this would change if you were a different generation? Or would you still feel the same way, irrespective of generation?
That's a very, very deep and profound question, I must say. Got me thinking. I'm just thinking here. See, in like the first aspect, which is about one's dislike for being micromanaged, I think 99% of the cases people would not like it, right? And even the second aspect that you spoke of, I don't think even that's going to work. So in my opinion, from my vantage point, I would say regardless of what generation one is or one belongs to, these are innate attributes that as humans, right, as we have evolved, we have inherited these values or way or attitude or belief system, if you will, and I don't think that's going to die soon, and this is how it's going to be, right? So in my opinion, whether it's a Gen Z or a Gen X or a millennial, these are very innate and inherent qualities that come to us as human beings, and I don't think that's going to that what Gen Z or whatever category one falls into, it will have a little ramification on how one feels about these two things that you spoke of.
Exactly. And that's the whole, like, I always get asked this. I always get asked, we're living in a world where we have 4 generations in the workforce. It's crazy to manage all of their needs. It's, we always have to keep adapting. And I stop and I say, what are you adapting to? You just have to treat people well. Like, that's the only thing. No matter what your generation is, you treat people with decency. You give them autonomy and you recognize them. And the fourth one, which we didn't actually talk about, but the psychological safety and this feeling of being safe at work. People have these 4 things. It doesn't matter if I'm a Gen Z or a Gen X or a millennial. These are the things that we need for engagement. And the minute we start to focus on, okay, I have a Gen X, I need to adapt my approach. No, the person's a human being, and human beings all have the same needs and wants when it comes to engagement and when it comes to motivation. So that's I've just given you a brief background into how I approach HR. I do like to collaborate, and I like the person to actually realize the question or the answer themselves. So I'm happy we came to the same conclusion.
Absolutely. I love this part of the podcast the most. Trust me. Okay, that was good. Thank you, Sara. Let's now talk about HR technology. Please walk us through what strategies have you implemented to foster trust and transparency in the use of automation in HR processes.
Perfect. This will go very well with what we just discussed about feeling psychologically safe at work, being recognized, given autonomy, and being treated in a decent way. And it's the same approach for whatever you do. So like we try and overly complicate HR, and we try and overly complicate employees, and we try and make it seem like it's a very difficult job. But the truth of the matter is, when we're transparent with employees and when we explain the reasons why we want them to do certain things, even if that's automation, or even if that's learning a new software, or implementing some generative AI in the workplace, the main components that we need to actually do is we need to make sure they understand the importance of why we're doing it. And then number two is that we address whatever fears they might have. Because a lot of the times there's resistance for two reasons. Either because they don't know how to do something and they're too ashamed or maybe too proud to say they don't know how to do it. So they just ignore it, or they just put it off, or they just, become defensive. And the other reason people resist these things or implementing these things is because they're scared. They're scared that about how it's going to affect them. Like, if I start to use this, then my position is going to be redundant. And the truth is, it's true. In a lot of the aspects, when we are implementing softwares and AI tools and other automation processes, the potential position that they were doing could be made redundant. And the most important thing is to acknowledge that and say, yes, it's a valid concern. However, a way to not become redundant is to not be stuck and not try and keep doing things the same way, and to be open that times are changing, that we need to grow, we need to develop, and do this, free up some of your time and learn other skills. So it's the same approach always. It's how do you communicate it? How do you address how they're feeling? And how do you make sure that they feel safe and competent in order to do this? And it just involves, from your end or from the HR's perspective, communicating, and over communicating. And this is how we or I tackle this.
Great answer. Let's now delve into this delicate balance that one is to strike between technology and human connection. In your opinion, how should one balance the need for automation by maintaining open lines of communication and accessibility for employees?
I love that question. I'm one of the people, I love technology. I love ways to automate redundant and administrative tasks. And I love to just basically improve efficiency. So the more automation that I can get on board, the better. I love it. That being said, I also love the human connection. I love engaging with people. And I love getting to know people and playing and joking around with them. So I balance it by trying to automate as much as possible so that we can free up our time in order to do things that are actually fun with each other. So I'll give you an example. Where I'm currently working, we have about 1,200 drivers. And it's very difficult. They have different shifts, so it's very difficult to connect with all of them. So what we do now is we've leveraged technology, and I send them a webinar on Teams, a Teams webinar. And then on this webinar, we play quizzes, we play games. I give them, updates about what's happening in the company. We play like bingo. We joke around, and even though they have different shifts, and even though not all of them can attend, the beauty is that all of them can look at it, all of them can watch it. So technology has actually brought us so much closer if we use it in the right way.
Got it. I agree with what you just said. Okay, I think this brings me to the last question of this awesome conversation. Is there any piece of literature or any book or any documentary that has shaped your leadership journey?
You're gonna laugh at my answer. I would say Harry Potter. Do you know Harry Potter? Have you read the book Harry Potter?
Yes, the whole world knows him.
So I know you were probably expecting something like Vulnerable Leadership by Brené Brown or something like that.
No,
amazing book.
No, I didn't have any such expectations. I'm very please go ahead. Yeah.
So no, I've read some amazing leadership books and books about vulnerability and empathy and those kind of things. But The reason I choose Harry Potter as a book that's really influenced my leadership style is because I love that book. I love the book because it's not about this person who is always getting things right. And it's not about the most competent person, and it's not about the most privileged person, but it's about a person who fails. It's about a person who believes in teamwork, in coexisting, in ethical leadership, in, good versus evil. And there's a lot of heartbreak, there's a lot of loss, and there's a lot of mistakes, but there's a lot of gain, and there's so much to gain. And so I had always, I know it sounds, but ever since I was a kid, that book just really shaped how I think of many things. So Harry Potter is definitely the book that I would choose in this in this regard.
I must admit, I have never, I had not anticipated Harry Potter as the book that you would come up with, but I'm deeply impressed with the rationale, that you brought up. I will try and see if I can get my hands on the book again and look at it from a completely different lens, the way you see it.
Yeah. I used Harry Potter, so I'm learning Spanish, and I'm reading Harry Potter now in Spanish because I've read it so many times. So I'm reading the first book again in Spanish because I'm trying to learn Spanish through reading a book in a language that I don't know, but having memorized it. So it's a way that I'm trying to learn that language. I'll let you know how that goes.
Awesome. Great. This brings us to the end of this podcast. Sara, big thank you to you for being a guest on the CHRO Mindset. I am blown away with the kind of insights and practical stories that you spoke of. I'm very sure this would have massively helped all our listeners. Many thanks once again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pulkit. It was a real pleasure to be here, and I hope it's done a lot of the listeners some good.
Great. Thank you. To all our listeners, we are grateful that you tuned in to the CHRO Mindset today. Your presence does help us deliver better content and also helps us get leading practitioners from HR function to join us and talk about what goes in their mind when they think about building modern day workplaces. Stay connected for more enriching discussions, and we do invite you to share your thoughts by leaving a review or a comment on on any podcast platform that you use. It would mean a great deal to us. Thank you once again. Thanks for listening to the CHRO Mindset Podcast. Don't forget to hit subscribe and leave us a review. Join us next week for another insightful conversation with a top HR leader. And if you have any questions or feedback, reach out to us on social media or via email. Thanks again for tuning in. See you next week.